Hi, I'm Laine Cunningham, and I'm here reading from Message Stick, which is a novel that came out in late 2008. It's set in the Australian outback, and it deals with some of the issues of the Aboriginal population there, but it's also a really good thriller. So I'm going to be reading today from chapter 3 called The Healing. In this one, the protagonist, Gabe, is going to go out into the desert. His best friend has gone missing and has been missing for quite some time. And Gabriel is a biracial Aboriginal man who, when he was a child, was forcibly removed from his family by the government. This was actually done until 1972, when the government finally gave in to UNESCO and the world, civil rights organizations that stopped doing it. So. This is a modern tale, and here we have Gabe as an adult preparing to go up to see his best friend's parents, elderly parents. Chapter 3, The Healing. Parents don't expect to bury their children. Gabe drove north along the Bruce Highway with that single thought weighing the back of his skull. He barely noticed the mountains to his left or the clarity of the air over the ocean. It was one of those rare days when the water was the iridescent blue of reef sharks. The air was drenched with the smell of kelp and scrubbed sand, and sunlight shattered on the waves. The country was beautiful, as always, and it nearly blinded him. He brushed away tears. In the weeks since Ian had disappeared, Gabe had been unable to read the sea. The beacons that preceded sun and storm, usually so transparent, were garbled. All he knew for certain was that a change stole further up the shore every day. And like the tides that left curious gifts, the change brought an arcane knowledge he could not yet grasp. For the long evenings, he had watched the rollers, deciding at every moment to look for his friend, then sitting on the balcony until dawn found him still in town. It wasn't that he couldn't make such a difficult trip. So far, he had avoided the fallow spread that plagued most men his age. But some terrible thread had cinched up his spine until he was rigid as the wicker chair. And so he sat, hours heaped up unnoticed beside him, counting the tides and keeping a lid on his emotions. Dob, Ian's father, called every day. The phone always rang at 2 minutes past 7. 2 minutes past the last chance to hear from the missing persons unit. The news was always the same, no news, yet the men drew strength from sharing the silence. When Dob finally asked him to go into the outback, Gabe stayed up half the night preparing for the trip. He remembered meeting Ian, who had not yet turned 30, at a wildlife park. The young man fed bloody beef to dingoes, tempted crocodiles with dead chickens, and kept up a patter that was part history, part bull, and all easy charm. He made adults laugh and schoolgirls swoon while standing a skip away from predators. Now Gabe had to find him in a vast desert among those same animals. He slowed as he approached Cairns. Even this close to the city, fields of sugarcane originally planted with forced labor covered the coast. Chance had told him about the Pacific Islander slaves. She had told him a lot of things, sprinkling their dinners with history and recounting myths on their strolls. He had never gotten around to asking her how she knew so much about a country that wasn't her own. She had left messages offering prayers for Ian and his family, along with invitations for Gabe to call her. They could still be friends, he knew. She was strong enough to care for him, even though they weren't lovers anymore. He wouldn't call her just yet. There would be time enough for that while he was on the road. Besides, he would probably need an encouraging voice to help him through this journey. He wound through the suburbs to a cottage framed by freestanding trellises. Fuchsia knotted every inch of the lattice, and pansies corralled by driftwood splashed across the lawn. Against this background, Dob seemed gray and drained. He waited on the sidewalk with both hands squeezed over a cane and made no move as Gabe parked on the street. Once taller than his son, pushing barrels of salted fish around a warehouse had compressed Dob's spine. Early retirement had turned into a second career carving birds and bush animals. He had always been able to make a go of whatever life dealt him, but recently had lost a lot of weight. Chances are slim that you'll find him, Dob said as Gabe got out. Search planes have flown over, but a pilot won't find piss in a bright orange pot. We just need to know, is all. We need to know something. They walked up the drive and met Rosie at the front door. She was a tiny woman with bones that caught the edges of the wind. He held her, bent under the shadows of the fuchsia, until she could take a breath without crying. They passed through a living room animated by Dobbs carvings and sat in the kitchen. He ate what they put before him. The soup, Rosie's own recipe of garden vegetables, basil, and heavy cream, had been thawed out to go with the sandwiches. The meal was far different than the meat pies and cakes she usually prepared. Rosie was giving up on the things that brought her pleasure. Suddenly Gabe wasn't sure he could do what they wanted. He chatted about the news and the weather and every other trifle that had no bearing on the emptiness brushing against their knees. As they got up from the table, Gabe saw that neither of the McCabe's had touched their food.